We continue on now to Korea Book Club, our weekly segment where we delve into the world of Korean literature and books through works in translation and beyond. And this week, it's our special monthly edition of the club. And that means we have with us in the studio today cultural essayist Colin Marshall, host of the podcast 콜린의 한국 and author of the new essay collection 한국 요약금지. So, Colin, it's great to have you with us again.
Thank you very much, Sang-ho. Glad to be here.
Now, Colin, usually for our special monthly edition of the club, we review or introduce to our listeners a popular or notable Korean work that has not yet been translated. But this week, we asked you to look at an English translation because it is one that has been in the headlines recently, right?
It has, that's right. The book is a poetry collection called Phantom Painwings. That's the name in English. It's by Kim Hyesoon, one of the most famous living poets in Korea, and it was translated by Chae Don-mi, or Don-mi Choi in English, who's also well known for her own poetry, written in English in her case. And just last week, this book, Phantom Painwings, won a National Book Critics Circle Award in the United States, becoming the very first translated work of poetry to do so.
Wow, it's the first ever translated work of poetry to win this award, and also the first ever Korean writer to win it as well, right?
Yes, exactly. Kim Hyesoon is the first Korean writer to win a National Book Critics Circle Award. And we can get a sense of how important the award is if we look at its past winners, which for the Poetry Prize include John Ashbery, Elizabeth Bishop, Robert Lowell, the late Louise Gluck. All these names poetry fans will know, Western poetry fans anyway. And the National Book Critics Circle Award actually isn't the first Western literary prize that Kim Hyesoon and Chae Don-mi have won together. In 2019, they won Canada's Griffin Poetry Prize for the collection Autobiography of Death, which reflects on the MERS virus outbreak in 2015 and the sinking of the Sewol the year before.
Wow, so Kim, together with her translator Chae, are already recognised internationally for their works then, and this latest award, I guess, further cements their status overseas. And the topics she writes about, the MERS outbreak, this whole ferry sinking, it sounds like Kim doesn't shy away from difficult subjects.
Not at all. The adjective shy certainly does not apply to her, at least on the page. One reason why Phantom Painwings has drawn so much more attention than the usual translated poetry collection has to do, I suspect, with this fearlessness, her fearlessness about working with haunting, harrowing, even scatological imagery, sometimes all in the same poem. And those who expect poetry to be prim, proper, and refined at all times will have their preconceptions challenged by Kim Hyesoon, and challenged over and over again.
Right, see, so she is someone who's pushing the boundaries, and I guess she's touching readers not just here in Korea, but overseas as well. So as we said, she's been getting this international recognition, but of course, long before that, she has been active in the Korean literary world for quite some time, and she's won just about every award a poet can win in this country. So perhaps it's best to look at this work, Phantom Painwings, in the broader context of all her work as well, both translated and in Korean. I know you wanted to do that. So what does this particular book fit, where does this particular book fit into such a wide and celebrated body of work?
Yes, Phantom Painwings, which was originally published here in 2019 as 날개 환상통, is the second volume of what Kim Hyesoon calls her Death Trilogy. And the first was the aforementioned Autobiography of Death, or 죽음의 자서전. And the third, which has already been published in Korea, but not yet in English, is 지구가 죽으면 달은 누굴 돌지, which we could translate for now as Who Will the Moon Orbit When Earth Dies?
Right, so it's part of a series then, all with very arresting titles, I think. But the third one, Who Will the Moon Orbit When the Earth Dies? So it's who will the moon orbit rather than what?
Yes, it's who, it's not what. It's that choice is characteristic of Kim Hyesoon's poetry, which tends to blur the boundaries between human and non-human. And in Phantom Painwings, she anthropomorphizes everything from Mount North, which I think is Chae Don-mi's translation of Bukhansan, to the Seoul Arts Center as well. That gets human qualities. But more central is her merging of the human and animal kingdoms, and it's often difficult to tell where the persona of Kim Hyesoon begins and this avian alter ego she calls bird ends. And in an essay at the end of the book, she writes that when she works on poetry, her body transforms into what Chae Don-mi translates as womanimal. One word, woman and animal, smashed together, mashed up.
Womanimal.
Womanimal, yes, indeed.
Okay, so that's also, I'm guessing where the title comes from, I'm assuming as well, this alter ego that she has.
Yes, exactly. The alter ego of Bird, it's a presence throughout Phantom Painwings.
Okay, so I take it that Kim's use of language is just as unconventional as the subjects she deals with as well.
Exactly. She shows no hesitation about deforming language to suit her own poetic purposes. And last year, Itami Kim profiled her in The New Yorker and evoked her previous work like this, and I quote, "She smashed words together and savagely enjammed her lines. She ripped apart syllable blocks and turned the letters of Hangul into raw material for typographic play. Mrs. Dusting Arms, Elephant God. Saliva drop explodes like Friongas." Again, those are just 2 words I said there.
Okay, so let me try and repeat that again. So, saliva drop explodes like Freon gas. That's 1 word that she's put together.
Exactly.
Interesting,
yes.
Okay. And the other one was Mrs. Dusting Arms Elephant God.
Yes.
All 1 word again.
1 word smashed together, no spaces.
Okay, so her use of language is clearly not conventional. But then I guess we must remember that this is actually a translated work from Korean as well. I mean, I imagine that poetry poses considerable challenges to any translator in the easiest of times, but Kim Hyesoon and her use of language, it sounds like she's on another level altogether.
Very much. I mean, my wife is a poetry translator, so in our household I hear about these problems regularly, but I don't think any readers or many readers would envy Chae Don-mi the task of rendering Kim Hyesoon's work in English.
Sure.
But they can get an insight into the process from Chae Don-mi's translator's diary, which is included in the back of the book, in the back of Phantom Painwings, in which she describes her approach, for example, to lines like these. These are 3 lines from the original, one of the original poems. 은는이가 으르레위 와과만도.
Okay, so wait, first, it's fascinating. So the translator, Chair, she provides insight on how she tackles the translation in the book as well, then you're saying.
Right.
I love that. Sounds like invaluable for literary translators and those interested in the art of translation. That sounds amazing. Then going back to those 3 examples you gave, those are lines, they're made out of nothing but grammatical particles in the Korean language, right?
Indeed they are. Most of them, as you know, with no equivalent at all in the English language. And so Chae Don-mi writes of translating them as follows. Izareambi, inaranov, and with only 2.
Okay, so those, again, just 3 words there, words put together. So is, are, and be.
1 line.
1 line. In, on, at, of, and with only 2. Okay.
Right, that's how she translates them.
Wow, okay, that's really interesting. And I guess that's a pretty amazing translation as well from Chair, I think. Those lines aren't exactly the same as the original, I guess, but then again, nor are they completely different.
Right, they have to be different by definition in the English language, but you can see how she was inspired by the language in Korean. And I mean, Chae Don-mi, who is an acclaimed poet herself, has had to reimagine certain aspects of Kim Hyesoon's work from the linguistic ground up. And in some cases, as she's written about, she had to press Kim Hyesoon to clarify her own meaning in her own mind, as in places where Korean allows ambiguity about, say, the subject of a sentence, while English doesn't. So there's a basic difference in languages there.
Well, it sounds like she did an amazing job, but I'm guessing that there's still some aspects of poetry like this inevitably lost in translation, though.
Yes, a clear example in Phantom Painwings is how Kim Hyesoon addresses her father, whose death, as well as the death of her mother not long thereafter, inspired the book. And many times she calls him not abonim, not aboji, not even appa, but no, the personal pronoun strictly reserved, as I understand it, for people your age or younger, but certainly not your parents, not your father.
Indeed. That's not just something that's, I guess, grammatically different, but something that's also culturally different in the 2 languages as well. The impact of calling your father you rather than father or even dad is quite unnerving for Koreans, I think.
Indeed.
It would be anyway. But yes, again, anyway, it shows a remarkable depth to her work, the different layers, I guess, you need to appreciate it. It sounds quite remarkable. Colin, what did you make of it?
I was impressed by the wildness, the sheer wildness of some of the imagery here and the places she's willing to go linguistically. This is not a young poet. I believe she is in her late 60s, almost 70 years old, but you see signs of a poet who is not complacent. If anything, she's grown less complacent and more willing to take risks as she gets older and as she gets more renowned. So you think, well, a poet in Korea, after you ascend these institutional levels, you win the awards, you even get well known outside Korea. Where do you go from there? Well, you can only just make your work more, you can only make it more radical, shall we say. And she's been described, many labels have been put on her, whether it be avant-garde or whether it be feminist. I mean, you can read her in these ways, but I prefer just to look at her and see just how strange things can get, how far she can push it. And I think she'll keep pushing as long as she can.
Sure, and I think some praise has to go to Cheonmi as well, because
of course
it's a work that's essentially done hand in hand, it seems like, because the award anyway, it's because of her that we have this work in English, and it seems like she's done a remarkable job translating it as well. And
it's of a piece, you could say, with her own poetry, with Chae Don-mi's poetry, so I think her fans in the West will probably be interested in Kim Hyesoon for that reason. There is some, not necessarily thematic overlap, but an overlap in their creativity or willingness to take risks.
And I suspect we will be seeing more of her works translated as well then, right?
No doubt. There is a third volume of the Death trilogy, partially autobiographical, which will certainly be translated into English before long, and it'll push farther, I suspect, into this territory. And I hope it includes a translator's diary as well. And if I can dream, I'd like to see it published in a dual language edition, with the Korean originals and the English translations side by side, because this is the kind of poetry where the creativity and daring of both poet and translator should be seen at once, and these are qualities that could well inspire curiosity about the Korean language itself in more than a few foreign readers.
Yes, that would indeed be a real treat, I think, for Korean literature and linguistic buffs out there. But I think even just this English translation would be great to see. So we have this collection, Phantom Pain Wings by Kim Hyesoon, translated by Chae Don-mi, and that was our pick for this week's Korea Book Club. Colin, thank you for that review today. We really appreciate it. Till next time, take care, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you. See you soon.
And that's our show for today. We'll be back same time tomorrow, so we hope you can join us again then. I've been your host, Kwon Jang-woo, and thank you as always for listening. Goodbye.